post that a few times during the event. So if you look near the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A, and you can click there to submit a question to the author. And we'll try our best to get to everyone's questions, but apologies in advance if we run out of time before we get to yours. We'll also be providing closed captions if you click on the CC link right next to the Q&A button, also at the bottom of your screen. And before we begin, I would just like to say thank you again for being here. We're immensely grateful for all of you helping keep our business and spirits afloat. And now I would like to welcome to PNP Live, Sarah Peckinen, celebrating the release of her book, The Golden Couple. So Sarah Peckinen is the internationally and USA Today bestselling author of 8 solo novels, as well as the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Wife Between Us, An Anonymous Girl, and You Are Not Alone. A former investigative journalist and award-winning feature writer, she has published work in The Washington Post, USA Today, among many others. The Golden Couple is the next electrifying novel from Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, the #1 New York Times bestselling author duo behind You Are Not Alone, An Anonymous Girl, and The Wife Between Us. Couple Marissa and Matthew Bishop attempt to put their lives back together after infidelity forces them to confront difficult truths about their relationship. They are desperate to salvage their marriage, and they seek help from Avery, a therapist with rather unconventional methods. Together, the three embark on a journey to patch up the Bishop's relationship, but uncover treacherous secrets beyond what they anticipated. Pekkanen will be in conversation with Jon Searles. Searles is the author of 3 critically acclaimed and best-selling novels, including Help for the Haunted and Strange But True, the latter of which was made into a film by the producers of La La Land. Jon was the longtime book editor of Cosmopolitan and appeared regularly for more than a decade on NBC's Today, CBS This Morning, and other popular morning shows to discuss books of the season. Jon's most recent book is Her Last Affair, coming on March 22nd, so keep an eye out for that. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Pekkanen and Jon Searles to PNP Live.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And I've got to say, this is a total full circle moment for me, because about 15 years ago, I had just sold my first book and it was going to be published. And I went to a big fancy conference in New York. And I, was all excited. I got a new outfit. I took the train up and I sat in the audience and I watched people, different people from publishing get up and speak. The keynote speaker was a guy named Jon Searles. And I sat there in the audience and I was literally blown away. He was just funny and charming, and everybody was like eating out of his hand and laughing, and we were all trying to mob him, like he was a rock star when he left the stage. So the fact that we're here together, like you were right at the beginning of my publishing journey and you were sort of, everything I wanted to be. I'm so grateful, Jon, that you came here tonight to join me, because you have always been so kind to other writers, just such a wonderful person. So it really means a lot to me.
It is my honor. And now I don't know if I can live up to that introduction. So maybe I should just log off right now.
Tech difficulty, tech problem.
Yeah, oops, come on. But I remember that conference because I was asked to speak. And whenever I go, it was a conference of new writers and people who were just newly published, like yourself, or wanting to be published. And I always try to come from a place of encouragement in those groups. And also I just try to tell funny stories and make it accessible and fun. And you were one of the rare people who actually sent me a thank you note afterwards. And over the years, we just kept in touch. And so, and when I remember your first book with Greer being published and they were having a book party, I brought some of my stuff from Cosmo and we came down to toast you. And I've just been so thrilled watching your success with these books. And I could not get enough of this book, everybody, The Golden Couple. So if you haven't read it yet, you are in for a real treat. It's an incredible, fast-paced, twisty, dark, everybody's suspicious. You don't know who to trust. A great read. So, but I was thinking maybe you could tell the audience, like set up The Golden Couple and maybe put in your words rather than me explain it, what it's about. How do you describe it? How do you set it up?
Yeah, so the Golden Couple, one of the things I love about it is that it is set in DC. So Politics and Prose is our local, DC independent bookstore. We've got a few, but they're the ones that are the closest to me. So it's kind of cool to have it, set in my neighborhood. But the Golden Couple is about a maverick therapist named Avery. She basically has lost her license because she does things her own way. She doesn't play by anybody else's rules. She's very unorthodox, and her method that she believes is the best therapeutic method is that when somebody comes through her door, she will assess them. And if she believes she can fix them in 10 sessions, she will take them on as a client. But the catch is they have to do whatever she says. So the Golden Couple begins with, that couple we all know. We see them on Instagram. They are living their perfect life. They're drinking champagne. Their kids are winning awards. They have the beautiful house. And this golden couple strolls through Avery's door. And I'm not giving anything away because this all happens in the first couple pages. The wife sits down and has a confession. She's been unfaithful. And the story goes from there.
And I have to, if you don't mind me adding in, and it gets more gripping and more strange and surprising and twisted as it goes. And Avery, what I love about the book is it's written in different points of view, and Avery is a first person point of view. So you feel this kind of intimacy with her. And she says and does some outlandish things, but you make it also, you understand her motivation so clearly. So bravo to you and to Greer for making that happen. So it's incredible.
Thank you. I mean, it's, and I want to hear about you on this too, but when you're thinking about the points of view and when you have multiple narrators, that's always something Greer and I debate quite a bit. Like, do we want it first person? We've actually used second person in one of our books, An Anonymous Girl, third person, and there are, pros and cons to all three. But yeah, for the Golden Couple, we did have Avery in first person. She was really the character that kind of held on to our hearts. We loved Marissa, the wife in the Golden Couple. She was the one that seemingly had everything all together. But Avery was a little bit more relatable, a little more complicated, a little more real, a little more gritty. So she got first person.
Yeah.
But Jon, I want to hear about you because I love your book. Oh my God, so good, so good. And you have multiple narrators. And so first of all, set up your new book.
Well, Her Last Affair is a book about love. I saw someone said, well, I was reading the book and it's about someone who's having an affair. And I said, well, that's the title, Her Last Affair. But it tells the story. It's set at a spooky old drive-in movie theater. There's that. And it's kind of a mix of genres. And it tells the story of three people, a widow, the woman who ran the drive-in with her husband for many, many years. And on the few nights before their 50th wedding anniversary, he dies in a freak accident. And she takes in a very charming British man and kind of starts an unusual relationship with him. So there's her, then there's a seemingly unconnected woman 1,000 miles away who's trapped in a boring marriage. And she hears one morning over Facebook from her very first boyfriend who says, I've been thinking about you all these years. So she begins an online affair with him. And then there's a third character, a kind of failed and bitter kind of malcontent writer from New York City who returns to Providence, Rhode Island, where he very first fell in love, and he reaches out to a woman who broke his heart years ago. So it's about three different characters who all reconnect with the past. And their seemingly separate storylines halfway through the book come together, and then it twists into a very thrillery plot from there. So it's a lot of fun. But so tell me, Sarah, your journey to publication. Like, how did you start writing fiction? Like, just to back up from the Golden Couple a bit, like, because I'm trying to remember, we talked that day, you sent me a letter, and we kept in touch, but how did you very first start writing?
Yeah, well, I was a journalist. So after college, I went right into newspaper writing, and I worked for many publications. And, I loved it. I covered politics, which I was actually pretty terrible at. I would sort of bumble around and be like, why is everybody so angry? And wait a minute, which one is that, middle-aged white guy, with the white hair, which senator is he? So I just, was terrible at covering politics. But then I eventually went to work for the Baltimore Sun. And I loved writing for the Sun. There were some great writers there. I sat across from Laura Lippman, the great crime writer, and people like David Simon had come through, and I began to write features for the Sun.
Laura, I mean, sorry, Sarah, I just hit the thing on my chair that makes it sink. The thing on your office chair.
Jon, you got shorter. What happened?
See, that doesn't happen when you do an event in a bookstore. But anyway,
right. I'm just waiting for my dog to come jump on my lap because I can't believe it's been this long.
Please, anyone wonder why else? And I very quickly. Anyway.
So yes, I was writing for the Baltimore Sun, and I would write narrative, so I would be writing nonfiction, but it would be told like, Truman Capote kind of pioneered this, would be told as if I was writing fiction, right? So that was kind of, I think, the bridge between the newspaper writing and the novels. But I left the Sun when I became pregnant with my first of 2 boys in 2 years. I now have 3. Oh, wow. I know, it's like, wow, are you okay? Do you want to drink? Do you want to see? What can we offer you?
I don't have any kids. I have a beautiful little puppy dog, and that's good. My husband.
Yeah. That's why you have such a serene apartment. I see behind you. There's like fire and everything's beautiful and lovely. Here there's like a couple little nooks I can hide, from Nerf guns and things like that. But anyway, so I left the Sun to take care of my boys, and I missed writing so much. It was something I'd had my whole life. I had tried to write books as a kid. I'd always written. And when it was taken away, I just felt adrift. I felt like, I'd lost a friend. I'd lost my way. I'd lost my purpose. I love being a mom, but I needed to write. So one night I went up to my computer and I just started typing, and I was like, I got to say something. I've got to do something. And that eventually turned into my debut novel, The Opposite of Me.
Oh, wow. And then how long did it take you to finish that first novel? And did you sell it right away? I mean,
I know there are stories. So that was like me weeping. There were stories about people who were like, yes, it flowed out. And then I got an agent and this and that. For me, I started writing it, and, I worked in like the cracks of the day. It was like, I've got a kid sleeping for 10 minutes. Like, let me go throw down a line or two. I've got, it was really difficult to get the time. But after I had written about 150 pages, we had a house fire, which I know is something you can relate to. And the electrical surges destroyed my computer. So I thought like the novel was gone. I'm like, well, clearly it's a sign from above. My writing sucks. I was never meant to be a novelist. Like, that's it. And we ended up moving to a hotel for a couple months, and the house was rebuilt. When we moved back, remember, this was, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I was unpacking a box a few months later, and it had one of those discs that we used to put in the computer to like back up, and it said book on it. And I was like,
you didn't remember having it.
I backed it up at some point. So I popped it in, and I'm like, this isn't terrible. Like, I can work with this. And apparently it was terrible because it was never published, but it got me an agent. And then the next book got published. So it was, I would say, 5 years of writing in every spare moment to get the first book published.
Good for you, though, the determination to stick to it, and also having lived through fire too. I know the feeling of like you're so displaced, the last thing you can focus on is writing. So you must have been so thrilled when you saw that disc, and just to think, oh wait, I have something from.
But it's probably like you, like it's worse not to write like than to write. I mean, do you feel that way, that there's always this kind of itch and this compulsion to write, and maybe you take a little hiatus or whatever, you do other things, but do you feel that way too?
Yeah, I think if I don't work for more than a week or on something creative, then I start to get a little grouchy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We can ask my husband if he agrees to that, but I think so, because it's a kind of not to sound all artsy, but it is kind of the creative release is good because it kind of de-stresses you and it's helpful, kind of gathers your thoughts and all that. So are you like a write every day person, Sarah? Are you like a get up and write every morning?
I like to get up really early and write. Like the earliest is like 4, but generally more like 5:36. And I like to have the clean brain, the hit of caffeine, the quiet house, and go till 10 or 11, and then do another shift in the afternoon. That's my
It's when Thomas and my husband, first met years ago. We were young. I would get up in the middle of the night and just write for a couple hours, then go back to bed. So when I would finish a book, he would say, "When do you write these things? I never see you write." And I say, now it's a little different. I'm like, "Come quick, I wrote a sentence."
Come celebrate, bring me champagne.
Does it just flow like it did? I think I was younger and had more energy, or I don't know. I just wake up. I mean, I still do that. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and work, but mostly kind of try to be like you, get up early in the morning when it's fresh, and then just work for a bit.
I can't imagine waking up in the middle of the night and working. Like you just stumble to the computer and.
Kind of. I don't know. Yeah. But so tell me, because I know we actually have a question, but someone's saying, how do you work on a book with a co-author? Does one of you write each different point of view? How do you tackle that? And I know I think I've asked you this before, or asked Greer maybe. Like I kind of know this answer, but every time I read your books, I wonder like how it came together. And I think it's fascinating that you work as a team. So tell us.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally most author pairs do separate in terms of, one will write one character, the other will write the second character, or their alternate chapters, or whatever they divide it up. But Greer and I actually have a Google Doc that is shared, so we can both see the screen at the same time. So our first 3 books were more like that, where it was a shared Google Doc and we would talk for hours and hours, talk about the scene. And then, we'd be getting it down on that Google Doc. With the Golden Couple, with COVID, things changed. I had 5 kids in the house, a very needy dog. I was renovating my kitchen. Greer had, 2 kids at home and her husband at home, and her husband loved to make smoothies. So the blender would go off and that was it. So it was hard to be in each other's houses, through Google Hangouts. So it was more the walk and talk, but there was definitely a lot more individual writing for the Golden Couple. But I would say the key to it is really the conversations to figuring out, not only the overall plot, but each individual chapter before it's written.
So that's what you talk it through, then you write it. But when was the first moment where you both said, "Hey, let's do this together"? Because was Greer your editor originally, I think?
Yeah, Greer was my editor I've written 8 solo books, so she was 6.5. She left halfway through my 6th book, and my 7th, I can't remember. Anyway, so she left, but we were really close. During, that time, I would come to New York, we'd have long dinners, we would sit at a restaurant for hours and talk and share a bottle of wine and just, talk about things that, normally author editor kind of, more business-like.
Yeah.
And we would say, we're taking off that hat, we're putting on our friend hat, let's talk about everything. So we were super close. And when she decided to leave Simon & Schuster, she called me and said, I'm thinking about writing a book. I'm not telling a lot of people this because I'm really scared, but I want to tell you. And, would it be okay if, I come up with an idea, I bounce it off you, or, would you mind reading some of my pages? And I thought about it and I was like, let's just write a book together. Don't go through all that. Let's just do it together because we love working together.
Yeah.
And she was like,
"That's so much fun." It must be a comfort to feel like, because you've done it both ways, on your own and with her. So there must be a real comfort level in, or I don't know, do you find that sometimes that you can just have a person to bounce things off of, where when you're writing it by yourself, you have to torture people in your life who are not writing it with you?
I would say the biggest difference for me is that when I'm writing alone, it is brain to fingertips. I like to blast music. I came up in newsrooms, so I don't mind noise and chaos, thank God, because I've got 3 boys. So, but it's all internal. What I had to learn to do, which I'm so grateful for, working with Greer, editors come at things verbally, like, yeah, they'll, send you a letter about your book and all of that, but they're used to talking to their authors. So I had to learn how to express everything that I wanted to write. So it was like adding that step. It was then brain, mouth, fingertips. But it was really valuable. I'm so glad I did that. And I love both. I love writing with Greer. I love writing alone. Like creatively, I feel like mixing things up is always exciting. And like Greer and I wrote a screenplay together, which was fantastic. But as long as I'm writing, I'm happy / neurotic.
Well, I have to say, I did notice some commonalities, by the way, between these 2 books. I was telling you earlier, we both have almost the same sentence. Did you? I don't know if you saw my note today. The first sentence of her last of hers, every marriage has its secrets. And then at some point I got to page, I think it's 88, and it says, all marriages contain secrets, of this I'm certain. And I thought, and that's Avery saying that. That's the therapist who Sarah mentioned at the start. The therapist character says that. So I thought that's so kind of interesting that it's kind of a jaded perspective, I guess. But
so crazy though that our books are so different, but like the fact that we had that theme, like we both have characters who are filled with secrets, right? That's
which I guess is what makes a good mystery, or good,
right.
good sort of. I always think all good books are mysteries on some level, because there's a question the reader wants to find out. So even I never think about categorization, like what's a literary book versus a genre book versus. I just always think of storytelling, and the best way to tell a story is to create a question in the reader's mind right from the start. And you have that here, because as soon as you open the book and you read about Avery, you're like, you want to know what the 10 sessions that she does, and these 10, for people watching, the 10 sessions, she has names for them. Like the second session is disruption. I'm trying to think of the different names for the different sessions, where she really she rattles the couple and she goes to their house. Am I giving too much away? I don't know if you want me to say these things, Sarah.
But here is the interesting thing, Jon, and I'm actually curious about this with you, like your editing process with your editor, because our editor not only gave us a title for the Golden Couple, we had the book with our 10 session method, and she goes, each of them needs to have a name. I'm going to throw out some names. You can use them or not. And she's like, confession, disruption. Like, we didn't change one. Yeah. So that was her. Like, we had the method, but she had the name. So amazing. I'm curious about your editing process. Like, what is it like?
Well, my editor is the great Peckinen at HarperCollins, and she has edited books like The Orphan Train, or she's Lucy Foley, The Paris Apartment, which is now #1 sheet. So she edits a lot of wonderful writers, and she is hands-on. In a way, I think each book gets more and more hands-on, and I'm so grateful to her, but there's a moment it's a little like an exorcism around here. But I think, I don't know, I just really trust her, because she sees things. I'm sure you and Greer feel this about your editor. She sees things that I don't see. She's able to read it for the 50th time and look at it fresh somehow. I don't know how. But, I never really think of myself as a quote unquote thriller writer, because my books are kind of a mix of genres. They always start from a place of real character. And so I start by writing character, but then the plot at some point kind of takes over, and it really turns into something, very twisted and hopefully page turning. But she helps me to kind of go back and look at the plot, to kind of whittle down some of the scenes, because I will write things way too long, and she helps me to focus and tighten it. And I write kind of weird, eccentric characters sometimes, but I want them always to have a heart, so the reader can really relate to them. And she's a real partner in that, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that.
Your characters are super complicated, and I'm honestly like, oh, I really like this character. And then the next page, I'm like, oh my God, that character's so creepy. And what are they going to do? Like, you don't know where anybody is coming from. They're all wild and original.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, like I said, I just try to write interesting, quirky people in odd situations. And with this, I was really attracted to the drive-in movie theater setting because when I go home to visit my mom, I always pass this abandoned drive-in movie theater on the side of the road, and no one probably even notices it, but I always see it. And I just would always look at it and think these kind of what if questions, like who owned it and what was it like when it was thriving. And then I thought, well, what if a love story took place there? And what if it was about the couple who owned the drive-in for all these years? And what if something really kind of dark and creepy happened? And then I was just kind of off doing it. Is that how you start with do you start with character or plot, Sarah?
You know, like with the Golden Couple, we started with the title, you know, and built it around that. We've done both. I mean,
your editor said to you, the Golden Couple's the title, write something about that?
She did. She said to us, I can't believe nobody has ever used this title, The Golden Couple. I think you guys can write a book around it. And we were like, all right, you know, game on, let's figure out what we can do. And, you know, we love writing about therapy. We've done that, like An Anonymous Girl was about, you know, a crazy therapist. And so we're like, okay, you know, let's dig into therapy a little bit. We love complicated marriages like The Wife Between Us. So we kind of blended the two. But yeah, it really started with the title, The Golden Couple. And that got us thinking about, you know, well, who is a golden couple? And we've all seen them, you know, as we discussed on Instagram. And then like, well, everybody's got secrets. Everybody's got, you know, things. Like, what if you got a chance to go look in the nightstand drawers of the golden couple and read their diaries? Like, what would you find out? And then we start twisting and we do what you just said. We do the what if. What if this? What if this? We say what if 100 times a day. And, you know, that's the thing that kind of keeps us going. And we might come up with 100 ideas and we throw out 99, but we keep one from that day. And just
so start to finish, Sarah, how long is the process for you when your editor says this title and then you think about it and then you start writing? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it?
No, it's generally a year. You know, and one of the, you know, great things about collaboration is kind of, you know, the accountability and, you know, needing to be there at a certain time. But one of the bad things is that, you know, you are also tied to the other person's schedule, right? So whereas, you know, getting up in the middle of the night and writing for a few hours like that would only work on your schedule. With a co-author, that might be a little bit more challenging. Yeah. So, you know, in some ways, you know, so in some ways it takes a little bit longer to do it when we're co-authoring, just because we have to, you know, somebody's kid gets sick, somebody has to, you know, has an emergency. So you can lose a little bit of work time here and there, but generally a year. I mean, I've done 12 books in 12 years. So yeah, it works out.
Oh my gosh, good for you. Well, Bonnie White has a question and she says, how does the location impact the plot? As our quote, local writer, Sarah, I love following your stories, which is nice. Bonnie White is very sweet. So how does the location impact the plot?
Thank you, Bonnie. You know, we actually messed up on one book. When we were writing You Are Not Alone, we decided to set it in a very isolated setting. And we're like, this is going to be great. It's going to be so claustrophobic. And it's only going to be like a small group of people in this, you know, little environment. And we wrote ourselves into a corner. We wrote 200 pages. And we were like, this is awful. You know, we showed the pages to our editor. She's like, yeah, it's really not working. We pulled it out. We changed everything up. We moved it to New York for that book. And then we had enough going on that, you know, the book ended up working. But, you know, what I've learned is that, you know, for me, an urban setting works better. The Golden Couple is set in DC. And, you know, I know the neighborhoods. Like you know, every kind of setting in that book, at least in Northwest DC, is you know, places that I visited and things like that. And so that's kind of fun to you know, just put a little bit of the area into the book. Yeah, but the urban setting is key. And John, I saw you light up when you're like, oh my God, 200 pages. That's like an author thing where we're like, oh, you struggled too, right? Like, have you ever had that?
Oh, I've been there, believe me. Well, for years, I was running a big part of a magazine, Cosmopolitan.
Cosmo,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, and I'm trying to write at the same time and doing Today Show segments. And so writing time was just, I don't know how I thought I could possibly have time to write. So it took me much longer to write my books, but I loved those other parts of my life. And so it was always juggling. So Carol Ahern says, hi, Carol. I can't picture you dealing with writer's block, but have you ever experienced it? Have you ever experienced writer's
You
block?
answer that one first, John. I want to hear from you, and then
No, my dad, I read a quote once and I said my dad was a truck driver, actually. And the quote was, my dad was a truck driver and he never had trucker's block. Because he just, and my dad was a truck driver. And so I wouldn't say writer's block but I would say where sometimes the story is not working. How you said you start to get this feeling, and it's this uncomfortable feeling when you sit with the pages where you just think, this is not working. And then you do the what if questions and you try different things and it's not working. And that's the point where you have to hand it over to a trusted reader, your editor or an agent or a husband or wife or, whatever, and someone you trust to tell you and to talk it through. Is that your experience with it, Sarah?
yeah, I mean, I find that if I hit a block, it means something's not working in the pages I've done. I tend to not believe in writer's block just because, when I work for newspapers, like I can just imagine saying to my gruff, editor, hey, I'm having writer's block. I can't do that, little brief, that little cop brief, and having them go crazy on me. So, I do, like you, I feel like it's, a little bit of a luxury and it can be an excuse at times. So for me, if I'm having trouble moving forward, I need to go back and think, what did I miss? What did I mess up early on that's keeping me from, having the story flow? But a lot of times, like, writing, I think I imagined like, I'll just sit down at my computer and I'll type and I'll have like a latte to sip and the angels will be singing and the book will pour out of me. And yeah, it'll be a little difficult sometimes, but it'll be great. But writing isn't like that. Like it is sometimes a wrestling match. Sometimes it's a dance. Like you beat yourself up, you write something, and then you look at that page and you just think, that is the worst page anybody has ever written in the history of books. Like we're really mean to ourselves at times. So yeah, I mean, it's wonderful and exhilarating and, terrifying and sometimes terrible, but we got to do it, right?
Can't help ourselves. That's the thing. So Allison Baker has a question. She says, have you ever read Samantha Downing's The Lovely Wife? In some ways, your book sounds like it may have a similar dynamic regarding the married couple. I haven't read your book yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Have you read that book?
I did read My Lovely Wife a while ago. It is, it's a psychological thriller, but the plot is very different. Have you read it, John?
I've not read it, no, so I can't. I never. So sorry to Samantha Downing, but I didn't ever even. There's a million books, and then I'm always like, how did I miss that book? Did you find that? Like for years, I was a books editor, and I did book segments on TV, and I would have every book sent to me, and then inevitably there was a book I hadn't heard of somehow, and I'm like, how is that possible?
Right, yeah. Right. This is my job, is to read every book, and
yeah. Exactly.
But there are still many out there.
There are, yeah, there really are. So what are you and Greer doing to promote the book? Because I was reading somewhere where you said, or maybe Greer said something, I never know where to read things, Instagram, Facebook, somewhere, about how you tried in the beginning of COVID to maybe tour a little, and then you admitted to yourself you just couldn't because of what was going on in the world. But with this, are you now doing a mix of virtual events like ours this evening and also some in-person things?
Yeah, so yeah, we're doing a bunch of things virtually. We just did a interview a few hours ago together, but we're dividing and conquering for the in-person. So I'll be at Old Town Books in Alexandria tomorrow. I think Greer has a virtual event in New York tomorrow. So, you know, it just made more sense with COVID to divide and conquer for the in-person events this time around.
Oh, that sounds really nice. I'm doing a mix, the same for Her Last Affair, where I'm doing some in-person events. And I think I told you about this one over email, that a New York City Symphony Space, we're doing, it's like, I've been mostly in hiding the last 2 years at a little house out of town, but we're doing an event with the wonderful actress Amy Ryan, who was in The Office and The Wire, and just recently in Hulu's Only Murders in the Building with Steve Martin and Martin Short. And she's agreed to do a chat with me in front of a live audience, masked, boosted, vaxxed, but we will have our masks off. And we partnered with 40 independent bookstores around the country. And I think Politics and Prose is one, and if not, they will be, where if you purchase from them, you get a code to stream the event if people want to stream. So, someone asked, an anonymous attendee. Oh wait, first Stacy Crummy, she's first, says, what is both of your favorite ways to celebrate the release of a new book? Oh, that's a sweet question.
Great question. But first, Jon, I have to say you're being very modest, because I don't think you mentioned the Netflix streaming Strange But True, right? Like that whole thing. Come on, tell them.
Well, no, my second book of mine, Strange But True, was turned into a film that's right now on HBO Max, and it has a terrific cast. It's Brian Cox from Succession, and if anyone's on Netflix, is Meade with Nick Robinson and Margaret Qualley. They're in the movie, and Amy Ryan, who I just mentioned, is in the film, and Greg Kinnear. So it's a great cast. I wish they stuck a little closer to the book, but it's still, there's so many wonderful moments to it, and the cast is fantastic. So, and it's on HBO Max right now, which is how I got to know Amy Ryan, because we met on the set of the film and stayed pals. And I said to her, I have this book coming out, Her Last Affair. Would you want to do an event with me? She was like, sure. And she actually said, I said, you know, when I do events, I like to talk, but I don't always like to read. I don't know if you're that way. But she said, I'll read for you. I said, you will? She said, yeah, people usually like to hear the author read, but she said, you know, I'm happy to do it. So she's actually going to read from the book too, which will be really
great.
And so my answer to that question is, I love to go on book tour. I love meeting readers. I love to go chat with other writers. That's really been such a pleasure in my life that I didn't know about when I dreamed of being a writer. I didn't know about friendships with other writers, because I find them so meaningful. And also friendships with readers who I've met over the years, who I stay in touch with all the time. Like, I have readers who text me from all over the place who I keep in touch with. So I really enjoy that. And then when I go to write, I kind of go inward again. So it's kind of nice to go out into the world, especially right now after all of us being much more inward. But what about you, Sarah? How do you like to celebrate?
Gosh, you know, honestly, I do love the events too. I'm a little bit worried after 2 years of not doing a lot. I've kind of forgotten how to be out in the world.
Yeah.
Like, I get overwhelmed if I do one thing a day. Like, if I go to the grocery store, I'm like, whoop, I'm done. I better, you know, go back to my laptop and type away. And I used to be, you know, like out doing 12 things. I think
you mean because
yeah, no, I think it's totally because of COVID. So, so yeah, I think, you know, the celebration, yeah, I mean, it's great having readers, like you said, Jon. It's really great having readers tell you what your book means to them, because when we're writing it, we're seeing it in one way. But when you guys get the book and you read it and you start, you know, having opinions about it, and oh, I didn't like that, you know, character, and I wish he had done that. You guys bring it back to life. Like, we've let it go and it has a whole second life. So that to me is really cool. Like, I love lurking on Goodreads or, you know, the other review sites and seeing what people have written and how they feel about it. Because I think part of me still feels shocked that anybody is reading anything I wrote. Like, it's like the author imposter syndrome. Like, how are people, wait, people bought a book? How? That's so crazy, you know?
Good. I hope you have that less and less, because you do such a terrific job. These books are incredible and they're so gripping, and they're just such, and they're so entertaining. Is that a bad word to say they're entertaining? But it's like you just lose yourself in them, because you're like, everyone you meet is suspicious in them, like all these people. And so you're wondering who has some bad intentions in this situation. But so there's an anonymous attendee who asks, have either of you ever had a time in your life when you've gone through so much emotionally that you just can't write, that it's too hard to tap into your feelings without it being really painful?
That's a good question. Wait, is that Avery, the therapist, asking that?
Exactly, I know. Yeah.
Honestly, the harder my life is, the more I need to write.
Wow.
I feel like I get things out. That is how I process things. That's how I learn what's going on with me. I've never hit that point, knock on wood, where things have been so bad I can't write. But for me, it's a relief, and it's writing is a friend. It's a friend I have a complicated relationship with, but it is a friend, and generally a good place.
Yeah, I think for me, well, writing this book, actually, Her Last Affair, our apartment in New York City burned down in this crazy way that, well, I now try to tell it really funny, but it was not funny at the time. An arsonist burned it down and fled the country, because when you burn someone's apartment down, you have to flee the country afterwards. And so we were bouncing from hotel rooms to people's spare bedrooms, and I was kind of just writing when I could, but I was dealing with insurance companies and trying to get our home rebuilt. And so there was that. And then sadly, my dad passed away in a motorcycle accident. And so there was a lot of heartache, and it was a hard time to write. But like you said, Sarah, it became something in the mornings I would get up and I kind of just channeled my heartache, or I'm almost like maybe put my heartache aside and just kind of lived in this world I created at this old drive-in, and these three people exploring their past and relationships with love and trying to reconnect and find love again. And I don't know, it was an escape for me, and it sounds like that's what you have too, Sarah, for yourself. If you're going through a hard time, it's like writing is like a salve.
Yeah, it is. It really is, because you are stepping out of the world that you're in, and you're stepping into a complete different world that may not be always easy, and may have its own pain and all of that. But you're I mean, don't you find, I was telling somebody the other day, like when I'm writing and I come out of it, it's like going into a movie theater when it's daylight and coming out at night, and it's disoriented, like where am I, what's happening? Like if you've been writing for a few hours, don't you feel like that when you come out of it?
Yeah, it's a nice feeling. Carol Ahern says, again, Sarah, happy Women's Day, honoring all women, Carol.
Oh, thank you. You too.
That's nice. I always say, because I grew up, my dad, as I said, was a truck driver, so he was on the road, and I was really home all the time with my mom and my two younger sisters. Then growing up gay, I was kind of bullied and didn't really fit in with the like boys playing football. So most of my friends were the girls. And then I worked in an office full of women at Cosmo for 20 years. So I hope, if I say I like women better, right. I hope you like.
So you're celebrating this day too. You're getting some honorary support kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is next for you guys? Sarah, you're writing, you said I don't want to say in case you don't want to announce, but what are you working on now?
Yeah, so no, I'm fine to say I am writing a solo thriller for the publisher who does my co-written books, St. Martin's Press, Jen Enderlin. So I'm writing I've actually just finished the first draft and turned it into my agent. So that'll be out in 2013.
Oh, wow. And so wait, 2013, 2023.
God, what year are we in? 2020. I don't even know. Blame COVID. Yes, 2023.
That's
I did not write a time travel book. Yes.
But Sarah, so how much work will there be between the first draft and this? Is it usually a big amount of change, or when you turn it in, is it pretty clean?
It's usually pretty clean. I tend to go back obsessively and work on it and worry about it and put it aside for a day and then can't stay away from it and go back to it. So I generally do get it pretty clean by the time I turn it into my agent. My boyfriend, I also call him the Eagle, because he can spot a typo from like 12 miles away on a telephone pole and like zoom in, and so like I wrote something in this book and I was describing how the hinges and the doorknob were a different color than the door. And then a few lines later, I was like, they pushed through the door. And he's like, no, 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 hinges, they would have to pull open the door. Like, who thinks that way? I have like a built-in copy editor. So he'll read it, and make sure there's nothing foolish in there. And then I have a couple, friends. I think Stacy is maybe listening now. I sent it to her recently.
Hi, Stacy.
Hey, Stacy, she's a great reader. So yeah, so I'll have a handful of people read it, but my agent has got it right now. And then after it's gotten a few passes, I'll then send it on to my editor. Because as you know, like, you don't want to send your editor anything less than a really good polished manuscript. They've only got so many reads in them, and they can take it up higher, but you don't want to deliver it here and then they take it here. Like, you want to deliver it here, so they
even better,
make it the best it can. Yeah.
And so do you do things when you're writing? Like for me, I'll like print it out and take it in the bath. I don't know, like read it out loud sometimes, lay it all on the floor. Like, do you do things like that to almost change the context so you see it somehow?
Yes.
I always feel the goal is finding a way to see it fresh, and those are ways of doing it. But do you do that as well, or?
Yeah, in fact, Greer and I talk about it all the time. We read things differently when they're printed than when they're on the screen. And I don't know if you can see behind me, I have whiteboards. Like, I am obsessed with whiteboards, and they end up looking like scribblings of the Unabomber by the time I'm done, like plotting stuff out. But I'm very visual. So I love to see like the landscape of a book in different formats, so yeah, like, printing it out, reading it, spreading it out on the floor. I've done all of that. Chopping it up, moving it around, realizing with horror that you've completely messed it up and you're, trying to undo it all. Like, that's all just part of it, right?
It is part of it, but it's what makes it kind of fun, Do you remember the very first thing you ever wrote? And then I'll stop badgering you with questions, but do you remember the very first thing when you were a little kid? Did you?
So I actually got in trouble in elementary school frequently. I was not a troublemaker, but I was in my own head all the time. And I would do things like, in second grade, I would, midway through the school year, still be going into the wrong classroom at the wrong time, or walking home during lunch because I didn't realize it was lunch and not the end of the day. And,
in your world, kind of?
I was thinking of stories. Like, it was much more interesting than what was going on in the world around me. My parents were called into my elementary school. My desk was crammed, with papers and all of this. And some of them were little scribbled stories. And I just always wanted to write. I wrote a book called The Lost Gold when I was like 8. Miscellaneous tales and poems I sent off to publishers in New York, like fully expecting to be published. I'm still kind of shocked it didn't happen, because they all rhymed. Like, who could turn down miscellaneous tales and poems? But
do you have it still somewhere, or?
I have some of them. Yeah. I think I have the Raggedy Ann.
Hold on, I left for a second. I was looking for, I don't know where it is. I have one of my books, but I don't know where I put it. I was gonna.
When you were a kid?
Yeah, but I don't know where it is. It's really sort of sweet and awkward. Wait, let me look one more time. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, I have on my website a letter on Raggedy Ann stationery that I wrote to New York publishers demanding to know why they hadn't replied to my submission.
I like that you were your own agent. So yeah. This was these books I used to make. These stories and stories and stories.
Oh my God, Jon, you illustrated them too.
I know. So, and I used to make these. My mom had this book of wallpaper swatches, and I thought this was beautiful.
Oh,
and I took these out and glued them to cardboard, filled them with this paper, and then I would write them.
What are the story titles, or
well, I always say this. My parents were shocked they had a gay kid, because one is called In Sugar Plum Land, and one is called Over the Rainbow, and one is called Behind the Rainbow. So, sort of like, hello.
Have you seen the wallpaper cover? Come on.
Yeah, but anyway, so I'm so sweet that I have this. I would love to see yours, Sarah. If you ever find it, you have to send a picture of it.
Yeah, I've got the Lost Gold around here somewhere.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what time we're supposed to, because it's like after 9. So do we go too long? Are we in trouble, or?
I don't has everybody stopped listening like hours ago and heard people talking?
You guys are absolutely fine. I actually had one final question for both of you, though. I was just curious as to what you both are currently reading, or would you suggest to the audience?
I mean, can I suggest this? It's just you. We traded books. Like Jon and I traded books, and we're devouring each other's books. I mean, I absolutely love this. Like you will see me recommending this all over the place. This is fantastic, and I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way. These women have done it again. This is a page turner from start to finish with great characters, an intricate plot, and you just don't want to put it down. So I think it says on the book back, look, unputdownable.
Don't put it down. Although I will say, Alyssa, I went into P&P a couple of weeks ago with my son, and I noticed you guys had a Joan Didion display. And so I picked up The Year of Magical Thinking, which I'm so ashamed to admit I hadn't read yet. And I'm like, oh, I'll just, look through the first couple of pages. My son is, buying some stuff. And half an hour later, I'm devouring it. I bought it. I brought it home. So that is another recommendation. But because everybody else in the world has read it, go read Her Last Affair.
All right, I love that. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to both Sarah and Jon for taking the time to be here with us today, and for that really wonderful and heartfelt conversation. We all really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the audience here today, as your patronage is really what allows us to bring you programming like this. And we wouldn't be able to continue to host these types of events without the book sales to support them. So please support Sarah Pekkanen and Politics and Prose by using the link, which we have posted a couple times in the chat, to purchase The Golden Couple. And be sure to keep an eye on our website for our current event listings, as we have plenty of excellent events to choose from to attend virtually, and also now some in person. So thank you again, Sarah and Jon, for joining us today. Keep well read, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Nice to